Welcome to Bariatric Business Accelerator, the short but impactful podcast for busy practitioners and their teams to help establish and grow your practice or program. I'm Karol Clark, your host, and this is part 3 of From Chaos to Systems. We covered the previous two the last 2 weeks, and honestly, though, I think this one might be the most important of all 3 of them, because here's what I hear about and see happen fairly often. A practice owner, physician, or leader gets really energized. They build out a whole thing, something like their intake process. They document the follow-up sequences. They create referral tracking logs. They're super proud of the systems they put in place, and it's solid. But then 6 weeks later, the team isn't really using it. Things have drifted back to the way they were before, and the physician or the leader who created it are frustrated, and they're wondering, why did they bother in the first place? The system wasn't the problem. Implementation was the problem. And implementation is almost always about people, not the paperwork or documentation. So when a team doesn't adopt a new system that's been created, the instinct is to blame the system automatically. It was too complicated. It didn't fit the workflow. And maybe that's the case, or maybe people say we need a different tool. And like I say, sometimes that can be true, but more often the system failed because the team didn't understand why it mattered. They didn't have a say in how it was built, and they weren't given the appropriate training and time to actually get comfortable with it. Recommend modifications if that's appropriate before they're expected to use it perfectly. I had a practice one time that rolled out a new patient follow-up process, a genuinely well-designed one when I took a look at it. And the way that they promoted this, they emailed the protocol to the team on a Friday afternoon with a note that says, Monday, this is what we're starting. And by Wednesday, it was already falling apart. Not because the team was resistant necessarily, but because they'd never been brought into the development, and it landed more as a mandate versus a solution that was going to be helpful for the practice and for them and for the patients. The way you introduce a system matters as much as the system itself, and I've learned this the hard way many times. The most important distinction I can offer here really is the difference between training and telling. Telling is sending an email, posting a protocol in a shared folder, announcing it in a staff meeting. Telling assumes that people absorb the information and apply it correctly on their own. But training is actually walking through the process together. It takes more time, I know, but it's so important. It's role-playing their intake call with your care coordinator. Until it feels supernatural to them. It is sitting with your front desk, going through follow-up sequences step by step and asking, does this really make sense to you? Where would this be hard for you? It's inviting your team to poke holes in the process before it ever goes live, because they will find the gaps. They're so good at this. They do it every day. And it's much better to find them in a meeting than in front of a patient or something like that. And training does take more time, like I mentioned. It takes upfront, but it pays back very exponentially. So once a system is in place, your team has to be trained on it, and they've been trained on it rather. The next question is, how do I make sure it keeps happening without you standing over everyone's shoulder and micromanaging them? This is where a lot of owners or leaders struggle, because the alternative to micromanaging feels like you're just going to hope for the best. But there's a middle ground, and I know if you know me or followed me at all, you know where I'm going with this. It comes down to 2 things: visibility, rhythm, and of course, measurement. Visibility means that you have a simple way to see whether the system is being followed. That's our documentation. It could be a weekly report on follow-up calls made, a check on how many referral source touch points happened this month, a glance at your intake conversion numbers. You can tell I'm relating to those 3 systems we talked about last week. You're not monitoring every action. You're just watching the outcomes of the system that it's designed to produce. Rhythm means you have a regular cadence, a weekly team huddle, a monthly check-in, where systems are briefly reviewed, not audited, reviewed. Is this working? Is anything getting in the way? Do we need to adjust anything? How can I support you? That ongoing conversation keeps systems alive and prevents that slow drift back to old habits, which will happen if this isn't going on. So how do you know if a system is doing what it's supposed to do? I just alluded to this earlier, you measure it, the thing that it was designed to improve. So if you build an intake system, your conversion rate from inquiry to booked appointment should go up. If you build a follow-up system, your retention numbers and reactivation rate should improve. If you build a referral and tracking system, that was the third one, you should have clear visibility into where patients are coming from and whether those sources are trending in the right direction. You're keeping track of that so that you don't get a surprise later on. A system that isn't connected to a measurable outcome is hard to defend, and it's hard for your team to keep motivated about it. Tie your systems to numbers, then share those numbers with your team so they can see the impact of what they're doing and how it is really positively impacting the practice. So this kind of wraps up From Chaos to Systems. This is the third episode. One goal to help you move from a practitioner that runs on memory and heroics to one that runs on processes so that you can actually scale, breathe, and sustain things over the long haul. If the series gave you clarity on where to start, I'd love to hear about it. Share your thoughts below, and if you want support actually building this out in your practice, that's exactly what I do each and every day. You can find out how to work with me at weightlosspracticebuilder.com, or just grab some free resources. I have quite a few of them at the same website. So I really, really appreciate you for being here. Like I say, I have struggled with micromanaging in the past, but I have learned that once I involve my team and we take the frustrations, we put systems in place, particularly around the ones that we talked about last week, it makes all the difference in the world, and it saves you so much time in the long haul, and it improves the satisfaction of your team and your patients. So anyhow, I'll see you in the next episode of this podcast. And in the meantime, share your comments, reach out to me if you have any questions. Karol, Karol, at weightlosspracticebuilder.com, and have a great day.